Okay, this is the dreaded and feared trig equations. It can be very tricky. It's involved, but at the end of the day, there's only two things you need to be able to answer these correctly: a reference angle and the quadrants that it lives in. So every time I'm solving these, keep in mind that's all I need. I need a reference angle and I need a quadrant that it's in. So this first one looks really, really horrible until you get rid of the words and just put the letters there. I'm going to put the 1 for emphasis. Right? Don't solve it. Don't try to factor that with the sign there. Just put S or C for cosine and T for tangent. It's just easier. Now you got to put the 2 parentheses, right? This is you never use the quadratic formula here. I said in class, if I see the quadratic formula used in this problem, you have a 0. I don't care. Even care if you get it right. You need two things whose product is 2s squared. So that has to be 2s and s. 2s times 1s is 2s squared, right? S times s is s squared. Now, there's only two things whose product is 1. Now, I just have to get my signs right. So if I were to make my foil rainbow here, right, over here, I'm going to get 2. And in the middle, I'm going to get 1. So I have to make a -1 in the center. So then this one has to have a negative. And this one has to have the positive. Right? You just sit there and you figure it out. You work it out. Or you can use that trick I did in class. Now, if the product of two things is 0, one of them must be 0. So either 2s plus 1 equals 0, or s minus 1 equals 0. Now you're going to subtract 1. I mean, I'm going to write it all. I don't want to, but I will. Subtract 1, divide by 2. So over here, I get that sine. Now you want to put the word back. The sine of angle x is -1/2. And over here, right, add 1. So you get sine of angle x equals 1. So remember, I'm giving you the number. You have to tell me the angle x, right? That's what you're looking for. You're solving for x. X is an angle. It's the angle that makes this number. So I can see that 30 degrees makes that number, but it doesn't make it negative. If this was +1/2, that would be one of my answers, but it's negative. So I know that my reference angle has to be 30. This is what I have the chart for. So the question is, where is that angle going to live? I'll erase this after I do it. But so you put the ASTC, right? All students take calculus, which isn't true. So remember, the letter stands for who is positive there. Quad 1, 2, 3, 4. Everybody is positive in quad 1. And I have -1/2. So I know for a fact I can't be there. In quad 2, sine is positive. So I can't possibly be there either. This angle has to live in quad 3, where sine is negative. And quad 4, sine is negative down there too. There's 2 places where sine is negative. So I have 30 degrees in quad 3 and quad 4. So this is why I wrote these up here for you to refer to. In quad 3, I'm going to take my reference angle and add it to 180. That gives me 210. And in quad 4, I take 360 and I subtract that 30. So I get 330. So those are 2 of my answers. And again, I told you many times, I said in class, you can just do sine 210. Sine 210, -0.5, -0.5. You know, you have the calculator, check them. I said in class, this is 0.5, duh. This is 0.707, this is 0.866. Check them, make sure that the angles that you got match the number that you're supposed to have there. This is -0.5. So both those angles will give you that. Now, this one, to be careful, this is not in a quadrant, right? Now, I couldn't fit it there, but you have that unit circle that I never draw in class, right? It's a circle of radius 1. And I told you put the C, put the S. When you see numbers of 0, 1, and -1, you have an angle that did not land in a quadrant. It didn't land in quad 1 or quad 2 or quad 3 or 4. It landed on an axis, either the x-axis or the y-axis. This particular angle, sine is 1 at 90 degrees. That is not a quadrant. It's not in a quadrant. It's on the y-axis. Okay, so this angle that gives me 1 is 90 degrees. And you can read that off the unit circle. All right, so again, when you see 0, 1, or -1, You have angles that are 0, 90, 180, 270, or 360, right? You're on that unit circle. If you have these numbers, then it's 30, 45, or 60. All right, so I'm going to work another one. Okay, so this is 2B. This one is very difficult. You have to be very careful with it. You might be very tempted in the beginning to just cross out the C's. I'm going to replace the words with the letters, right? So it's easy to just want to cross these out, right? If you cross out the C's, if you divide by C, you would just get T equals 1. And you'd say, oh, that's what I get, but that's not what you do. You have to subtract the C over here and set it equal to 0. Then you have a common factor that you're going to factor out, right? You have to take away the C from the T, which leaves you with the T, right? You're really dividing the C away. If you want to divide the C away and put it in the front, C divided by C is 1. All right, so you set it equal to 0. You factor out the cosine into the front, the C. Now, if the product of two things is 0, then one of them must be 0. Either this one is 0, remember the C is cosine, or the T minus 1 is 0. Again, if you add 1 over, you get that the tangent of the angle X is 1. So I'm looking for angles that make a 0 for cosine. Not there. I'm looking for angles that make a 1 for tan. I'll do that one first then. So my reference is going to be 45. How do I know that? Because that's where I see the 1 for tan. Now I just have to figure out where it lives. Remember, this time I have a positive. So I'm looking for places where tangent is positive. Definitely here. Everybody is positive in quad 1. Sine, cosine, tan, everybody's positive there. Tangent, though, look, the letters don't match. You see how you have a T and an S? Tangent is negative when you don't see a T. So that's out. Tangent is also negative here because the letters don't match. That's out. Tangent is positive where you see the T. So tangent is positive in quad 1 and quad 3. Awesome. That gives me one of my answers right away. One of my answers has to be 45. I mean, if you put 45 degrees in quad 1, you get 45. You know, you don't believe me. You know, if I were to draw 45 degrees in quad 1, it's 45. So you get an angle for free. Now in quad 3, you got to take 180 and add 45 to it. You get 225. So those are two of your answers. Now you're going to go back to this dude. Again, you'll have the circle because I'll give it to you because I want you to have the values. I'm looking for places where cosine is 0. So I know that's 1, 0. Here you have 0, 1. Here you have 0, -1. This one's -1, 0, but I'm not going to write it because I don't need it. At 90 degrees, cosine is 0, right? This is 90. 0, 90, 180, 270. So there are two places where I have zeros for cosine. At 90, the angle X has to be 90 and or 270. So this problem has 4 answers. 2 places where tangent is +1, 2 places where the cosine is 0. So if you had crossed out that cosine in the very beginning of the problem, oh, this is gone. You lost half the answer and hence half the points. You have to be super careful with these. I mean, these can be very, very complicated. It's probably the hardest thing we've done. So, you know, you have to take your time with them. You have to make sure that, you know, you understand what you're looking for. A mistake I see students do, this is very important. Some of you are going to do this and you're going to lose a point. You're going to get mad at me. Some students just write this down. They write tan x = 45. This is nonsense. Tan x = 1. So how the fuck is tan x equal to 45? It's not. You are looking for the angle x. I'm trying to make my angle symbol. The angle x. The angle x is 45, 225. Tangent was 1. That's how I know that the angle is 45 and 225. And again, if you're not sure, you know, hit tan 225. I'm going to put it in there. Hit equal. It'll be a 1. I know it's 1. I know it's going to work. This, you check the value on the calculator, what you have it for. All right, so I'm going to do another one. I don't know how many more I'm going to do, but at least one more. Okay, so this is the third, well, C, the third problem from number 2. So again, first thing you want to do is replace the word sign with an S. Now you're going to get this alone, right? It is a difference of squares, so it does factor, but they don't all factor. Like what if this was a 2? Some of the problems have a 2 here. So get it alone and take the square root. Add 1 to both sides. Divide by 4. Right? So then you get s squared equals 1/4. Now, this is where you got to take the square root of both sides. Remember, the most common mistake that I see a student make is they'll get here, and then they'll just say, oh, radical 9, it's 3. They forget the plus and the minus. And it's very important in this question, because if you screw up the sign here, you'll see, you're going to take the square root of both sides. So you want to put s equals plus or minus square root of the top, square root of the bottom. This is how you take the square root of a fraction. You take the square root of the top, you take the square root of the bottom. So you get plus or minus 1. Square root of 1 is 1. Square root of 4 is 2. Woo! So I have sine equals positive 1/2. And I also have that sine is equal to negative 1/2. Now I'm hoping you see that if you had dropped one of those, if you just put the plus, if you didn't put the plus minus, this is gone. And remember, I told you, you always get 2 answers here, right? There's 2 places where sine is negative and there's 2 places where it's positive. So if you lost the negative part, you lost, 2 of the 4 answers. So the reference is the same. We got our friend 30 degrees again. That's the same for both. Now, sine is positive where? This is why you do the thing. Sine is positive in quad 1 and quad 2. So then I'm looking at 30 degrees. In quad 1, it's just the same. It's the angle. And then in quad 2, take 180 minus 30, you get 150. So those are the 2 angles that will give you a positive 1/2. If you do sine 30, get positive 1/2. You do sine 150, positive 1/2. You can check it on the damn calculator. Now I got to figure out where sine is negative. Well, it's the 2 places where it wasn't positive. Quad 3 and quad 4. So these angles are going to be 180 plus 30, which is 210, and then 360 minus 30, which is 330. So you get those 4 answers. So again, it's important that you place it in the right quads, okay? So 4 answers, square root property. Yeah, it's the same game again and again and again. What's the reference angle and where is it? What quadrants is it living in? And then you can build the angles that make that number. I'll do one more. Okay, so this is D. I think this time I'm going to use that trick just to show it to you, so you have it in a video to watch. You don't want to do it with the words there, so I'll just replace everything with C. Now, it's tricky to factor. I'll show you. It's tricky to factor with the trial and error. It definitely has to be 2C and C, but you might have 3 and 2, 2 and 3, 6 and 1, 1 and 6, and you sit here and you try all these possibilities, and it just gets a little silly. So, like I did in class, I just showed you the little shortcut. You could take this 2. I'm going to write it again after it's factored. I'll probably erase all this. I'm going to take this 2 and I'm going to multiply the number at the end by 2. You'll see it's much easier this way. All right, you take the 2 in the front, you multiply the last number by the first number. And now that 2 is not there anymore. I moved it. It moved to the end. Now you just factor it. This is easy now. It's got to be C and C, right? C times C is C squared. Now you have to make a 12. 2 numbers whose product is 12, but you need an 11 here. So it's not going to be 4 and 3. It's not going to be 6 and 2. It has to be 12 and 1, right? You need a negative 12 and a positive 1, right? Make the rainbow. You have to make negative 11. So it has to be 12 and 1. And it has to be negative 12 and positive 1. Now, it's done, except for one little thing. This is not supposed to be a 12. It's supposed to be a 6. So I have to undo the multiplying by 2 that I did. So you have to just divide the 2 out. So here it divides evenly. So you can just put C minus 6. Here it doesn't divide at all. So the only thing what you have to do is you can't leave it like that. You put the 2 up in the front. You actually can leave it like that, but this is the proper way to factor it. Okay. So multiply the last number by the first number, factor it, divide out what you multiplied by, and then it's done. So now I'm going to just write this at the top and pretend that we did it. I'm going to write that one first. So pretend we did this on our own. Just make sure. 2c times c, hello. 1 times 6, yes, negative, right? Negative times positive, negative. And then make the rainbow. There's positive 1. 2 and negative 6 is negative 12. Negative 12 plus 1 is negative 11. It works. It's always going to work. All right, so now, like I said, if the product of two things is 0, then one of them must be 0. So set each one equal to 0. Here you're going to add the 6 over. Cosine x equals 6. Over here, subtract 1. Divide by 2. All right, this part's easy. So you get cosine x equals negative 1/2. Now, this first one, I said many times in class, cosine and sine, if you remember the graphing part, that's why you do that first. Those values go back and forth between 1 and -1, right? You get 1, 0, -1, and all the numbers in between, right? 0.5, 0.7, 0.8. So sine and cosine are never, ever bigger than the number 1. So if you're looking for an angle, x, that's going to give you a 6, it doesn't get bigger than 1, ever. So this is BS. You reject this. There's no solution to that. There's no way you're going to get an angle that makes a 6. Now, there is angle that make half. The reference is 60 degrees. You can certainly get this number. It's 0.5. This does happen. So, but I have a negative. So I know the answer is not 60. So I got to figure out again, where are the places where cosine is negative? Not quad 1. Everybody is positive there. So let's see. I have a C and a C. This is where cosine is positive. That's why the letters match. If the letters match, you're positive there. So that can't be where my angle lives. This angle is going to end up living in quad 2, where cosine is negative, and in quad 3, right? See, the letters don't match. If the letters don't match, that dude is negative there. That's why you put these fucking letters. That's why this thing exists, this ASTC thing. If the letters don't match, negative. If the letters do match, positive, and everybody's plus there. All right, so I'm looking for quad 2 and quad 3. So I'm going to put 60 in each of those quads. In quad 2, I take 180 and I subtract 60, I get 120. And then in quad 3, I take 180 and I add 60, I get 240. So I have a completely BS one that doesn't give me anything. And then I have one where I got 2 angles. So, you know, past this point, the problems start to get repetitive. They're redundant. They repeat the same idea again and again and again and again. So, you know, watching me work a gazillion of them until the end of time is kind of pointless. They're all variations of the same ones that I already did. If you look at all the rest of the ones that are on that sheet, which I did them all. Well, I did most of them. So, you know, you see the same patterns again and again. You know, problems like this. You have one where you have to use the square root. You have one where you have to factor out the common term, like B. So just again, be careful with these. Take your time. Remember, reference angle, quadrants. That's all you're looking for. That's all you're looking for. Unless you see something like this. You know, if you see sine x equals -1, or you know, you see cosine x equals 1. This is 270. Why? It's not in a quadrant. It's not. Right? When you see values of 1, -1, and 0, it landed on an X or Y axis. Those ones don't have reference angles in quadrants. So when you see the special numbers, like 1, -1, or 0, like this one here, the only place you get a 1 for cosine would be 0 degrees and then back around at 360. The cosine of 180 is -1. So, you know, when you see special ones like that, there's no reference angle. You know, they didn't land in a quadrant. You only get a reference angle when you land in a quadrant. Okay, so hopefully this is helpful. I know it's hard, you know, but fortunately you don't have too many of these. I mean, it is on the final, so you have to know how to do it. But It's not that bad.